I'm Rachel Montgomery, 32, and I never thought I'd own half of my childhood home through a legal loophole my own mother created. The day I found myself locked out after a 12-hour nursing shift, rain soaking through my scrubs, was when everything changed. Mom's silhouette appeared in the window, her face hardening as she told me I no longer had a home. Her new husband smirked behind her. What neither of them realized, that house was still partially in my late father's name. The inheritance he left me would come into play in ways my mother never anticipated. If you've ever experienced family betrayal, you know that hollow feeling that settles in your chest. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments so I can see the amazing community that's forming around these real-life family stories. Hit that subscribe button if you want more tales of family karma and justice served. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The two-story colonial on Maple Street was the only home I'd ever known. My father, James Montgomery, bought it the year before I was born, determined to give his family the stability he never had growing up. Every inch of that house held memories. The notches on the kitchen doorframe tracking my height through the years, the creaky third step on the staircase we never fixed because it served as a teenager alarm when I'd sneak in past curfew, and the maple tree in the backyard where Dad built my childhood treehouse. When Dad died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack at 58, our world shattered. He was a high school physics teacher, beloved by students and colleagues alike. The funeral was standing room only, former students telling stories about how he changed their lives. Through my grief, I took comfort knowing Dad had been meticulous about planning. Always prepare for the unexpected, he'd say. His will was clear. The house was to remain a home for Mom and me, with his half ownership eventually transferring to me while Mom retained her half. So you'll always have a place to call home, he'd written in a letter I found with his will. Mom's grief manifested differently than mine. While I threw myself into my nursing career, working extra shifts at the local hospital to keep busy, Mom retreated into herself. Elizabeth Montgomery had always been social, hosting neighborhood book clubs and volunteering at the library. After Dad died, those activities stopped. She rarely left the house, and when she did, it was to visit Dad's grave with fresh flowers. The change began 13 months after the funeral when Mom met Walter Prescott at a grief support group. Within 3 months, they were engaged. 6 months after that, they were married in a small ceremony to which only a handful of family members were invited. I tried to be supportive despite the whirlwind pace. Mom deserved happiness, and if Walter provided that, I would make an effort for her sake. Walter moved into our home immediately after the wedding. He was a retired investment banker, 15 years Mom's senior, with slicked-back silver hair and a perpetual tan. His cologne, an overwhelming sandalwood scent, soon permeated every room. From the beginning, Walter made subtle comments about my presence in their home. "Don't you think it's time Rachel found her own place?" he'd ask Mom when he thought I couldn't hear. Most adults don't live with their parents. He conveniently ignored that I paid all the utilities, bought groceries, and handled home repairs that would have otherwise required expensive contractors. As an ER nurse working through the pandemic, my shifts were unpredictable and exhausting. Coming home to Walter's cold stares became another stress I had to manage. Mom began changing too. She started drinking wine with lunch, something she'd never done before. Walter encouraged it, always ready with a refill. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a glassy stare that became all too familiar. My childhood bedroom gradually transformed under their influence. First, my high school trophies accidentally broke during cleaning. Then, Mom suggested moving my bookshelf to the basement to create more space. When Walter's son from his second marriage needed a place to stay temporarily, my bathroom became communal. The message was clear. My presence was tolerated, not welcomed. Through it all, I had 2 pillars of support. My best friend Kayla Reed, whom I'd known since 3rd grade, provided sanctuary on her couch during particularly tense weekends. Mr. Peterson, our 7-8-year-old neighbor who had been Dad's closest friend, regularly invited me for coffee on his porch, reminiscing about Dad and offering wisdom when I felt lost. Our neighborhood in Millfield had been our home for generations. Dad grew up 3 streets over. The community garden where Mom once volunteered still had her name on a plaque for organizing its renovation. The local diner where I'd had my first job still kept my favorite booth open during my weekend shifts. Every corner held memories, connections, and reasons why leaving felt impossible. This wasn't just a house, it was the tapestry of our lives, woven through decades of community bonds. But as Walter's influence over Mom grew stronger, those community ties began to fray. Mom stopped attending neighborhood gatherings. Walter complained about Mr. Peterson's dog barking. My history in this place was being erased one memory at a time, and I felt powerless to stop it. 6 months into Walter's residence, Mom stopped referring to my room as Rachel's room. Instead, it became the guest room you're using. Walter capitalized on this shift, convincing Mom that my continued presence was a burden on their new marriage. "She's taking advantage of you, Liz," Walter said one evening when they thought I was working. I had come home early after a patient canceled and overheard them in the kitchen. "She's a grown woman using you as a free hotel while she banks her nursing salary." "She does pay the utilities," Mom offered weakly. "The least she could do. We're providing free housing while she should be living on her own like an adult." My son Brandon had his own apartment by 25. The comparison to Brandon became a constant refrain, despite the fact that Walter had purchased that apartment for his son, something I learned later from Mr. Peterson's neighborhood intelligence network. Mom's behavior grew increasingly cold. Notes appeared on the refrigerator. "Please limit showers to 5 minutes and food in top shelf reserved for Walter's special diet." When I tried engaging her in conversation, she'd respond with one-word answers before finding a reason to leave the room. One Saturday morning, I noticed my childhood photo albums were missing from the living room bookshelf. When I asked Mom about them, she shrugged. We needed the space for Walter's golf trophies. "They're in the basement somewhere." After searching for hours, I found them in a water-damaged box, many photos ruined beyond repair. When I confronted Mom, her response stunned me. "This is Walter's house now, Rachel. His things take priority. Dad and you bought this house together," I reminded her, "and I've been helping maintain it since he died." Mom's eyes hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Your father is gone. Walter provides for me now, and you need to respect that, or find somewhere else to live." That evening, I overheard Walter on the phone discussing what sounded like debt payments. Phrases like, "just need another month," and "the house as collateral" floated through his closed office door. My nursing friend who worked with addiction patients had taught me to recognize signs of gambling problems, and Walter showed many. Secretive phone calls, unexplained absences, periodic euphoria followed by tense anxiety, and constant money concerns despite his supposedly comfortable retirement. When I tried discussing my concerns with Mom the next day, she launched into bizarre accusations. "Walter thinks you've been going through his private papers," she said. "And quite frankly, I'm starting to think he's right. You've never wanted me to be happy after your father died." "That's not true, Mom. I'm concerned about—" "Walter says you're jealous because you're still single while I've found love again. He thinks you resent him." The conversation devolved from there, with Mom reciting Walter's opinions as if they were her own. The mother, who had once been my closest confidant, had become a ventriloquist's dummy for a man who'd known her less than 2 years. The situation worsened when Brandon, Walter's 7-year-old son, moved in temporarily after supposedly losing his apartment. He took over the second guest room and spread his belongings throughout the house. His gaming setup dominated the family room, his protein supplements filled the kitchen counters, and his dirty laundry somehow always ended up mixed with mine. To avoid the growing tension, I picked up extra hospital shifts, sometimes working 16 hours straight. Coming home only to sleep, I became a ghost in my own house. One night, I returned to find a note taped to my bedroom door. "If you can't contribute more to household expenses, we'll need to discuss alternative living arrangements. Mortgage payments have increased. Walter." This was news to me, as I knew the mortgage had been paid off 3 years before Dad died. Something wasn't adding up. That weekend, while Mom and Walter were at his golf club, I went through Dad's old filing cabinet in the basement. Behind a folder labeled Tax Records 2010, I found a sealed envelope addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. "For Rachel, if questions arise about the house." Inside was a copy of their deed, his will, and a letter explaining that he'd left his half of the house directly to me, not Mom, specifically to ensure I would always have a home regardless of what happened after his death. "I've seen too many families torn apart over property," he wrote. "This is your insurance policy, Rachel. I pray you'll never need it. But if you do, know that I wanted to protect you. Your mother knows about this arrangement and agreed to it when we updated our will 5 years ago." Mom had known all along but had clearly forgotten this detail when Walter entered the picture. As a nurse, I recognized this selective amnesia might not be entirely her fault. Walter's influence, combined with grief and increasing alcohol consumption, had changed her in fundamental ways. As I sat in the basement reading Dad's letter over and over, the betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about a place to live. It was about erasing Dad's wishes and my place in the family. 3 days after discovering Dad's letter, I worked a particularly grueling ER shift. A multi-car accident had brought in 8 victims simultaneously, including a family with young children. For 14 straight hours, I moved between trauma rooms, assisting with everything from minor lacerations to life-threatening injuries. By the time we stabilized the last critical patient, a 6-year-old boy who reminded me of my cousin at that age, I was emotionally and physically drained. The hospital hallways felt endless as I shuffled toward the exit at 11 p.m. Outside, a spring thunderstorm had transformed the parking lot into a series of deep puddles. By the time I reached my Honda Civic, my scrubs were already damp. The rain intensified during the 20-minute drive home, visibility reduced to the few feet illuminated by my headlights. All I could think about was a hot shower and my bed. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, which wasn't unusual given the hour. What was unusual was my house key failing to turn in the lock. I tried again, thinking the rain had affected my coordination. Nothing. I moved to the back door with the same result. That's when I noticed the small envelope taped to the mailbox, partially protected from the rain by the overhang. Inside was a note in Mom's handwriting. "Rachel, Walter and I have decided it's time for you to be independent. Your things are in boxes in the garage. The code is the same. Please return the old key through the mail slot." Mom. I stood frozen, rain plastering my hair to my face, unable to process what was happening. Thunder crashed overhead as I rang the doorbell repeatedly, then resorted to knocking. After several minutes, the porch light flicked on, and Mom's silhouette appeared behind the frosted glass panel. "Mom, what's going on?" "My key doesn't work." I called through the door. "We changed the locks today." Her voice sounded distant, rehearsed. "Walter and I decided it was time for you to find your own place." In the middle of a thunderstorm? After I just worked a trauma shift? "Mom, please, let me in. We can talk about this tomorrow." Walter's voice came from behind her. "You're a nurse with a good salary, Rachel. You can afford a hotel tonight. This dependence isn't healthy for anyone." "Mom, please." My voice cracked. "I've been on my feet for 14 hours. I just helped save a teenager's life." There was a long pause before Mom responded. "You're an adult, Rachel. Figure it out." The porch light switched off, leaving me in darkness as rain continued to pour down. I stood there for several minutes, knocking intermittently, before the reality of the situation sank in. They weren't going to let me in. I retreated to my car, turned the heater on, and sat in stunned silence. The rain drummed against the roof as lightning periodically illuminated the house where I'd spent my entire life, now forbidden to me. Around 1 a.m., when it became clear no change of heart was coming, I reclined my seat as far as it would go and attempted to sleep. Sleep never came. By dawn, I was shivering, despite the car's heater, my scrubs still damp. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Kayla, who was on night shift at the hospital and had heard about the trauma cases. I called her back, my voice barely recognizable as I explained what had happened. "Those manipulative bastards," Kayla said, rage evident even through the phone. "Come to my place right now. I'm just getting off shift. I'll have coffee waiting." "I need to get some of my things first," I said. Mom mentioned boxes in the garage. "I'm coming with you," Kayla insisted. "Don't face them alone." An hour later, Kayla's red Subaru pulled in behind my car in the driveway. Mom's curtains twitched, but no one came outside. The garage code still worked, revealing about a dozen hastily packed boxes labeled Rachel's Things in Walter's handwriting. As we began loading boxes into our cars, the interior door opened, and Walter stepped into the garage. He wore a navy bathrobe monogrammed with his initials, arms crossed as he supervised our movements. "There should be 15 boxes total," he said clinically. "Your mother was very thorough." "Where are my photo albums?" I asked, not seeing them among the boxes. "And Dad's watch collection he left me?" Walter's expression remained neutral. "We only packed what was in your room. Anything else is household property. Those albums were mine. And Dad specifically left me his watches in his will. We can't find documentation for that." Walter checked his watch. "You have 20 minutes before I need to close the garage for a scheduled maintenance appointment." There was no maintenance appointment. This was about control, about ensuring I had minimal time to discover what was missing. Kayla and I worked quickly, loading as many boxes as we could into our 2 cars. As I grabbed the last box I could fit, something caught my eye on the workbench. A stack of flattened moving boxes, far more than would be needed for my belongings. They were planning something bigger. This wasn't just about removing me. They were preparing to move entirely. As Walter closed the garage door behind us, I caught a glimpse of Mom watching from an upstairs window. For a brief moment, I thought I saw regret in her expression, but she turned away quickly when she realized I'd seen her. Back at Kayla's apartment, we sorted through the boxes. My clothes were haphazardly thrown together, many items missing. My nursing textbooks and certification documents were there, but the handmade quilt from my grandmother was gone. My laptop was included, but my external hard drive containing years of photos was missing. The pattern was clear. They'd kept anything of potential value or sentimental importance. Most heartbreaking was finding my father's reading glasses case empty. He'd always kept a handwritten note to Mom inside it, a tradition from their early dating days. That note was gone, along with the glasses he'd worn every day of his adult life. As I collapsed on Kayla's couch that night, physically and emotionally exhausted, the reality of my situation hit me full force. I had been exiled from my own home by the person who should have protected me most. Everything I thought I knew about family, about unconditional love, had been upended in a single night. "This isn't just about the house," I whispered to Kayla as she brought me tea. "It's like Mom has forgotten who she is, who we were as a family." "People change," Kayla said gently, "but legal rights don't. Your dad made sure of that." As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, Dad's letter was tucked safely in my nursing bag, the one thing I'd kept with me rather than leaving in the car overnight. It would become the foundation for what came next. After 3 days of sleeping on Kayla's pull-out couch, the initial shock began to give way to something more productive. Determination. I'd spent those days in a fog, calling in sick to work for the first time in years, barely eating, and struggling to process what had happened. On the 4th morning, Kayla sat down across from me at her small kitchen table with a serious expression. "My brother Michael is coming over for dinner tonight," she said, refilling my coffee mug. "He works in real estate law. I think you should talk to him." Michael Reed had always been the serious older sibling, 7 years our senior and perpetually looking like he'd just stepped out of a business meeting even in casual settings. That evening, he listened intently as I explained the situation, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. When I showed him Dad's letter and the copy of the deed I'd found, his eyebrows shot up. "This is significant," Michael said, examining the documents. "Based on what you've shown me, your father left his half of the house directly to you, not to your mother. The deed is clear about joint ownership with rights of survivorship between your parents, but your father's will created a specific carve-out for his half to go to you. What does that mean practically?" I asked. "It means you own half that house, Rachel. Legally, they can't sell it without your signature. They can't take out a home equity loan without your consent. And they certainly can't prevent you from accessing your property." "But they changed the locks," I said. "That's actually better for you legally," Michael explained. "They've committed what's called an exclusionary act against a legal property owner. That strengthens any case significantly." The next morning, Michael referred me to Amanda Mitchell, an attorney specializing in property disputes. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, with creaking wooden floors and walls lined with law books. Despite the traditional setting, Amanda herself was modern and direct, with a quick mind that immediately grasped the nuances of my situation. "Your case is stronger than most I see," she said after reviewing my documents. "Not only do you have clear documentation of ownership, but you also have evidence of financial contribution through utility payments and home maintenance. The lockout is legally problematic for them, especially given the circumstances." Amanda explained that Massachusetts property law, where our story takes place, provided several options. We could pursue a partition by sale, where the court orders the property sold and proceeds divided according to ownership percentage. Or we could seek a buyout arrangement where either you purchase your mother's share or she purchases yours. "I don't want to force my mother out of her home," I said, feeling the weight of the decision. "That's understandable, but remember, your mother and Walter have already demonstrated they have no such reservations about you." Sometimes legal action is the only language people understand when relationships deteriorate to this point. Over the next week, I gathered documentation. Years of utility bills in my name, receipts for home repairs I'd paid for, bank statements showing regular contributions to household expenses. I created a spreadsheet calculating my financial investment in the property over the 5 years since Dad died, a number that surprised even me when totaled. Throughout this process, I struggled with waves of doubt and guilt. Was I really considering legal action against my own mother? The woman who had nursed me through childhood illnesses, who had sat up with me when my first boyfriend broke my heart, who had been my rock during Dad's funeral. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie awake on Kayla's couch, replaying memories and wondering when things had gone so wrong. Had there been warning signs I missed before Walter? Should I have been more supportive during Mom's grief? The questions circled without resolution. I tried calling Mom several times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. I left messages asking to talk, to find a resolution without lawyers, but received no response. I even drove by the house once, hoping to catch Mom alone, but Walter's car was in the driveway, and the curtains remained drawn. The turning point came when I visited Mr. Peterson. The elderly neighbor invited me for coffee on his porch, his arthritic hands wrapping carefully around the mug as he shared what he'd observed. "Your mother's not been herself for some time," he said. "Walter keeps her isolated. I rarely see her in the garden anymore. And when I do, he's always hovering nearby." Mr. Peterson leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Your father worried about something like this, you know. Not Walter specifically, but about your mother's tendency to be influenced by stronger personalities. James told me he set things up so you'd always have a claim to the house. I want Rachel to always have a home," he said, "no matter what happens." As Mr. Peterson spoke, a memory surfaced. Dad and me in the backyard, painting the treehouse when I was about 14. "Property is more than walls and a roof, Rachel," he'd said. "It's security. It's history. It's a physical connection to your past and future. Never take it for granted." That evening, as I sat with Amanda reviewing our strategy, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Jennifer, who lived about an hour away. "Why are there trash bags of old photos at the curb at your house? Mom and I drove by and rescued them. Looks like family albums." I asked Jennifer to send photos, and within minutes my screen filled with images of black trash bags split open, revealing the family photo albums I'd been told were missing. There was my baby book, my parents' wedding album, and a photo book Dad had made documenting my nursing school graduation, all tossed out like garbage while Mom and Walter prepared for whatever was coming next. The last thread of hesitation snapped. Dad had tried to protect me to ensure I always had a place in the family home. Walter was systematically erasing that protection, and Mom was either complicit or too far under his influence to stop it. I nodded to Amanda. "Let's proceed," I said. "What's our first step?" As Amanda outlined the legal process ahead, I felt something unexpected. Strength. For weeks, I'd been reacting to events beyond my control, but now I was taking action. Dad had left me the tools to protect myself, and I would use them. If you've ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for yourself against your own family, you know how heart-wrenching that decision can be. I never imagined I'd need legal help against my own mother, but sometimes the right path isn't the easiest one. Before we continue to the next part of this journey, I'd love to hear if anyone else has experienced family betrayal that forced them to make difficult choices. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing to hear more real-life family stories. Now, let me tell you about our legal strategy. Amanda Mitchell's office became my second home over the next few weeks. Between shifts at the hospital, I'd meet with her to develop our approach, review documents, and prepare for what would likely be a difficult legal battle against my own family. Property disputes between family members are among the most emotionally challenging cases, Amanda explained during one of our sessions. But they're also among the most important to pursue properly. Housing is a fundamental need, and your father clearly intended to protect your right to it. Our strategy began with researching the specific legal mechanism we would use: a partition action. In simple terms, this would force either a physical division of the property, impossible in our case, or, more likely, a sale with proceeds divided according to ownership percentages. The court prefers that parties reach an agreement without a forced sale, Amanda said. So our initial approach will be to use the threat of partition to motivate a reasonable settlement. Either your mother buys your half, you buy her half, or you both agree to sell and split the proceeds. I don't want to make my mother homeless, I reiterated. Based on what you've told me about Walter's behavior and the moving boxes you saw, they may already be planning to sell. Our action could simply ensure you receive your fair share when they do. Amanda assigned her paralegal, Marcus, to conduct additional research on Walter Prescott. What he discovered painted a troubling picture. Walter had been married 3 times before my mother, each marriage lasting between 4 and 7 years. Property transactions followed each divorce, with Walter walking away with substantial assets each time, despite apparently limited personal wealth upon entering the marriages. It's a pattern, Marcus explained, spreading financial records across the conference table. He marries women with significant assets, liquidates or leverages those assets during the marriage, then leaves when the money runs low or questions start being asked. His most recent ex-wife had filed a complaint alleging financial manipulation, though she eventually dropped the case during divorce proceedings. The timing aligned suspiciously with Walter beginning to attend grief support groups, where he'd met my mother. He's a predator, I said, the pieces falling into place. And Mom is his latest target. It appears so, Amanda agreed. The good news is your father's foresight created a significant obstacle to his usual method. Walter can't access your half of the house without your cooperation. Our next step was documenting my attempts to resolve the situation amicably. Amanda suggested sending a certified letter stating my ownership claim and requesting a meeting to discuss options. The letter was professional and non-confrontational, simply stating facts and expressing a desire to find a mutually beneficial resolution. 3 days after the letter was delivered, Mom called. It was nearly midnight, and her words came in an angry rush. "How dare you threaten us with lawyers? After everything we've done for you? Walter says this is elder harassment, and we could press charges." "Mom, I'm not threatening anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Dad left me half the house. That's just a fact. All I'm asking for is a conversation about how to move forward. You're trying to steal my home. Walter says your claim is fabricated. We've spoken to our own attorney who says your father's will was never properly executed." This was news to me. "Mom, I have copies of all the legal documents. They were properly signed and witnessed. You were there when it happened, remember? 5 years before Dad died. When you both updated your wills?" There was a pause, then her voice changed. "I don't remember that. Walter says I would remember something that important." Before I could respond, I heard Walter's voice in the background. Mom's tone immediately shifted back to anger. "Walter says not to talk to you anymore. All communication goes through our attorney now." She hung up. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with text messages from Walter's number. "Back off now or we'll countersue for harassment and defamation. You'll lose your nursing license when we're done with you." I forwarded the messages to Amanda, who advised me to cease direct communication. "This is actually helpful to our case," she explained the next day. It demonstrates their hostility and unwillingness to negotiate in good faith. Also, his threat about your nursing license is empty. He's trying to intimidate you because he knows you have a legitimate claim. We proceeded with filing the formal partition action with the county court. The document detailed my ownership claim, the circumstances of my exclusion from the property, and requested court intervention to resolve the dispute. As legal proceedings began, the conflict spilled beyond the courthouse. Walter apparently began telling family members and neighbors that I was trying to steal Mom's house after she generously let me live there rent-free for years. The neighborhood divided along predictable lines. Newer residents who only knew Walter's version sided with them. Longtime neighbors who remembered Dad and had witnessed my contributions to the home and community over the years supported me. Mr. Peterson became my most vocal advocate, telling anyone who would listen about Dad's intentions and Walter's controlling behavior. The court ordered a mandatory mediation session before proceeding to a formal hearing. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I found myself sitting across a conference table from Mom and Walter, with our respective attorneys and a court-appointed mediator present. Mom looked smaller somehow, her normally styled hair limp and her complexion pale. She avoided eye contact throughout the mediator's introduction. Walter, by contrast, projected confidence in an expensive suit, his arm possessively around Mom's shoulders. The mediator, a retired judge named Eleanor Winters, began by explaining the process and asking each party to state their desired outcome. I want to honor my father's wishes while ensuring my mother's well-being, I stated. I'm open to several solutions: selling the house and splitting proceeds, buying my mother's half if she wishes to relocate, or selling my half to them at fair market value. Walter spoke for both himself and Mom. We simply want to live peacefully in our home without Rachel's interference. Her claim is tenuous at best, and this legal action is causing Elizabeth significant emotional distress. Judge Winters turned to Mom. Mrs. Prescott, do you have anything you'd like to add in your own words? Before Mom could respond, Walter squeezed her shoulder. My wife has authorized me to speak for her. The stress makes it difficult for her to discuss these matters. The mediator's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her making a note. Nevertheless, I'd like to hear from Mrs. Prescott directly. Mom finally looked up, her eyes darting between Walter and me. I just want this to be over. Rachel shouldn't be doing this to her mother. The words sounded rehearsed, empty of her usual speech patterns. The mediation proceeded with proposals and counter-proposals, none gaining traction. Walter rejected every suggestion, insisting the house belonged solely to Mom despite documentary evidence to the contrary. 2 hours in, when Judge Winters pressed Walter on his rejection of a seemingly reasonable buyout offer, he finally lost his composure. This is ridiculous. Elizabeth and I have plans for that house that don't include Rachel. We're selling it and moving to Florida next month. A buyer is already lined up. The outburst confirmed my suspicions and violated the court's temporary injunction preventing any attempt to sell the property during litigation. Judge Winters' eyebrows rose as she made another note. Mr. Prescott, are you saying you've arranged to sell the property that's currently under a court-ordered hold? Walter's attorney quickly intervened, calling for a break to consult with his clients. As they huddled in the corner of the room, Mom glanced back at me. For a brief moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something I hadn't expected: fear. The mediation ended without resolution, but Walter's admission about the planned sale strengthened our position considerably. As Amanda and I left the courthouse, she was cautiously optimistic. The judge will take note of their attempt to circumvent the court order. Plus, your mother's demeanor raised concerns. If this goes to a hearing, the court may order an evaluation of her capacity to make financial decisions. That evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Mom's voice, quieter than usual. Rachel? It's me. I'm calling from the grocery store payphone. She sounded nervous. Walter doesn't know I'm calling. I need you to know this isn't what I wanted. Walter says we need to sell the house because of his investments, but I never wanted to lock you out. He said it was the only way to make you understand it was time to move on. Hope flickered briefly. Mom, we can fix this. Come meet me without Walter. We can talk through options that work for both of us. There was a long pause. I can't. Walter checks the car mileage. He monitors my phone. He says, "You're manipulating me just like your father did." "Dad never manipulated you," I said gently. "He loved you. He protected you. That's why he made sure the house would always be there for both of us. I have to go. Walter will be wondering where I am." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm so sorry." The line went dead. I immediately called Amanda, who advised caution. This could be genuine remorse, or it could be a tactic to get you to drop the case. Either way, maintain the legal boundaries. If she wants to reach a settlement, it needs to happen through proper channels. I sat on Kayla's balcony that night, watching the sunset and thinking about Mom's call. The woman who raised me was still in there somewhere, beneath Walter's influence. But could I reach her before it was too late? The next day, we received notice that Walter had attempted to transfer his and Mom's interest in the property to his son Brandon's name, a transparent attempt to circumvent the court proceedings. The judge immediately blocked the transfer and scheduled an emergency hearing. The battle lines were clearly drawn now. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about protecting my mother from Walter and honoring my father's wishes. As Amanda prepared our case for the upcoming hearing, I steeled myself for what would likely be the final confrontation with the man who had torn my family apart. The county courthouse stood imposingly in downtown Millfield, its granite steps worn by generations of citizens seeking justice. On the morning of our hearing, I arrived early, dressed in a conservative navy suit I'd purchased specifically for this occasion. My nursing scrubs, my usual uniform, didn't feel appropriate for fighting for my inheritance. Amanda met me at the entrance, her briefcase bulging with documents. "Ready?" she asked, her expression serious but supportive. "As I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. Inside courtroom 3, Walter and Mom already sat at the respondent's table with their attorney, Gerald Hoffman, a silver-haired man with an expensive suit and a reputation for aggressive litigation. Mom kept her eyes down, while Walter leaned back in his chair with affected confidence. Judge Carolyn Diaz, a no-nonsense jurist with 20 years on the bench, called the hearing to order promptly at 9 a.m. After preliminary introductions, Amanda presented our case first, methodically walking through the documentation of my ownership, my financial contributions to the property, and the circumstances of my exclusion. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of one joint owner illegally excluding another," Amanda concluded. "Miss Montgomery is not seeking to displace her mother, but simply to assert her legal rights to property her father explicitly left to her. The respondents have already attempted to circumvent this court's orders by trying to transfer the property and by arranging a sale during the litigation hold. We ask the court to order a partition by sale, with Miss Montgomery having right of first refusal to purchase her mother's share." Gerald Hoffman's defense centered on attacking the validity of Dad's will and my claim to ownership. "Your Honor, James Montgomery's will was prepared without proper legal consultation and contains contradictory provisions. Moreover, Miss Platings in the 71, Montgomery abandoned the property voluntarily after a dispute with her mother about household contributions." "Objection," Amanda interjected. "Mr. Hoffman's characterization directly contradicts the evidence. Miss Montgomery was physically locked out of the property after working a hospital shift." Judge Diaz nodded. "Sustained. Mr. Hoffman, please stick to facts and evidence." Walter shifted uncomfortably as his attorney adjusted his approach. "Your Honor, Mrs. Prescott is elderly and in declining health. Forcing the sale of her home would create undue hardship. My mother is 61, not elderly," I whispered to Amanda, who made a note. "Mrs. Prescott's precise age and health status?" Judge Diaz inquired. Hoffman consulted his notes. "She is 61 and in good general health, Your Honor." "So not elderly by any standard definition, and with no specific health concerns that would make relocation particularly burdensome?" The judge pressed. "Well, no. But then let's avoid mischaracterizations," Judge Diaz said firmly. "Continue with substantive arguments." As the hearing progressed, the court ordered a property appraisal to establish current market value. Henderson Appraisal Services was appointed as a neutral third party to assess the home. Walter objected strongly to this particular company, which raised Amanda's suspicions. "There's something he doesn't want them to find," she murmured to me. During discovery, we learned why. Walter and Mom had taken out a home equity line of credit 4 months earlier, borrowing $150,000 against the property without my knowledge or consent. The money had disappeared into accounts under Walter's sole control. As a joint owner, my signature should have been required for this transaction, making the loan potentially fraudulent. The temporary injunction preventing property transactions was expanded to freeze the remaining loan funds. Walter's attorney immediately filed motions to dismiss our case, claiming the loan was for necessary maintenance and improvements, though no such work had been performed on the house. While the legal proceedings continued, the personal toll intensified. I received a tearful call from Aunt Patricia, Mom's younger sister, after Walter had called various family members claiming I was trying to put Mom out on the street because I needed money for gambling debts. The irony of this projection wasn't lost on me. "Your cousin Mark believes him," Aunt Patricia said. "But I know you, Rachel. You're your father's daughter. James would never have raised someone capable of doing what Walter's claiming." "Thanks for believing in me," I said, touched by her support when so many others had accepted Walter's narrative without question. "Walter won't let me talk to Elizabeth directly anymore," she continued. "Says she gets too upset. That's not like her, Rachel. Your mother has always been the strong one in the family." Her words echoed my own concerns. Mom had always been resilient, pragmatic, the family mediator during conflicts. This passive, withdrawn person who wouldn't make eye contact in court was a stranger wearing my mother's face. The case took a dramatic turn when Henderson Appraisal discovered something beyond the unauthorized loan. Walter had attempted to take out a second mortgage a week before our hearing, using forged documents that purported to show he was the sole owner. The mortgage company had flagged the application due to discrepancies with county records and our pending litigation. "This is fraud, plain and simple," Amanda told me when the evidence came to light. "The court takes forgery and attempted fraud very seriously. This strengthens our case considerably." When confronted with this evidence at our next hearing, Walter's cool facade finally cracked. "I was trying to protect my wife's interests," he shouted, interrupting Judge Diaz. "Rachel's trying to steal what should be Elizabeth's retirement security." "Mr. Prescott," Judge Diaz warned, "outbursts like that do not help your case. And characterizing a legal owner's attempt to assert her property rights as stealing is both inaccurate and inflammatory." As Walter's attorney attempted damage control, Mom sat beside him, shoulders hunched, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. For the first time, I wondered if Walter's control extended beyond emotional manipulation into something more sinister. During a recess, I expressed my growing concerns to Amanda. "My mother's behavior isn't normal. She's always been strong-willed and outspoken. Now she barely speaks and seems afraid of Walter." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "There are legal mechanisms for addressing undue influence or diminished capacity. We could request a psychological evaluation, though that would extend these proceedings and potentially damage your relationship with your mother further. If she's being manipulated or if her judgment is impaired, doesn't she need protection regardless of our relationship?" I asked. "You're right," Amanda agreed. "Let's request the evaluation. The court may not grant it based solely on behavioral changes, but combined with the financial improprieties and Walter's demonstrated dishonesty, we have a reasonable case." Our motion for a psychological evaluation was met with vehement opposition from Walter and his attorney. Judge Diaz took the matter under advisement, promising a ruling within the week. 3 days later, Amanda called with unexpected news. Walter's attorney reached out about settlement discussions. They're suddenly eager to resolve this quickly. "What changed?" I asked, suspicious of the sudden shift. "I'm not certain, but I suspect the prospect of a psychological evaluation for your mother has them worried. If she's diagnosed with any cognitive impairment, all their financial maneuvers could be scrutinized more closely." We agreed to a settlement conference, scheduled for the following Monday. The weekend dragged as I considered potential outcomes and what I really wanted from this painful process. On Monday morning, I arrived at Amanda's office to find not just Walter and his attorney waiting, but also a surprise addition. Mom's sister, Aunt Susan, had flown in from Arizona. I invited her, Mom said quietly, her first direct words to me in months. I needed someone in my corner. Walter looked displeased but maintained his composure as we all took seats around the conference table. My clients are prepared to offer a buyout of Rachel's claimed interest, Gerald Hoffman began. $50,000, contingent upon Rachel relinquishing all claims to the property. Amanda smiled politely. The property is appraised at $550,000. Rachel's half interest would be $275,000. Your offer isn't remotely reasonable. The negotiations continued for hours, with proposals and counter-proposals. Throughout the discussions, I noticed Aunt Susan watching Walter closely, her expression growing increasingly concerned as she observed his interactions with Mom. During a break, Aunt Susan pulled me aside in the hallway. "Something's not right with Elizabeth," she whispered. "She's not herself. Has she seen a doctor recently?" "That's part of what this case is about," I admitted. "I've been worried about her for months. Walter controls everything." Susan's jaw tightened. "I thought the family was exaggerating when they said you were at war with your mother. Clearly, I've been misinformed about a lot of things." When we reconvened, Susan sat closer to Mom, occasionally whispering to her. Walter repeatedly tried to interject or answer questions directed at Mom, earning disapproving glances from both Susan and Amanda. By late afternoon, we had reached an impasse. Walter refused to consider any settlement that didn't leave him in full control of the house and its equity, while I remained unwilling to surrender my rightful inheritance for a fraction of its value. "Perhaps we need the court to resolve this after all," Amanda finally said, gathering her papers. "We'll proceed with our request for a psychological evaluation and continue with the partition action." As we prepared to leave, Mom suddenly spoke up. "Wait. I want to talk to Rachel alone." Walter immediately objected. "Elizabeth, we agreed to let Gerald handle everything. She's my daughter, Walter." Mom's voice carried a strength I hadn't heard in years. "And this was my home with James long before I met you." Surprise rippled through the room. After a moment of tense silence, the attorneys agreed to give us privacy, though Walter left with obvious reluctance. When everyone had gone, Mom and I sat facing each other across the conference table. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Because Dad wanted to protect both of us," I said gently. "He left me half the house so I'd always have a home. Just like you. Walter's trying to erase that protection. Walter says we need to sell to secure our retirement," she said, but doubt had crept into her voice. "Mom, where did the $150,000 from the home equity loan go?" I asked. "Did you see that money? Did it improve the house or secure your future in any way?" She blinked, confusion crossing her face. "Walter handles the finances. He said it was for investments." "What investments specifically? Do you have documentation? Statements? Anything?" Mom's silence was answer enough. "He's using you, Mom, just like he used his previous wives. He marries women with assets, drains those assets, then moves on. Dad saw this coming somehow. That's why he protected my interest in the house." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know what's real anymore, Rachel. Sometimes I can't remember conversations Walter says we had. I feel foggy all the time." "When did that start?" I asked. Professional concern mixing with personal worry. "After Walter suggested I try his special sleep aids," she admitted. "And with the wine he always pours with dinner." A chill ran through me. As a nurse, warning bells were ringing. Sedatives combined with alcohol could certainly cause cognitive impairment and memory issues. "Mom, I think you need a medical evaluation, not for the court case, but for your health. Will you let me take you to see Dr. Marshall? He had been our family physician since I was a child." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'm scared, Rachel. What if something's really wrong with me? Then we'll face it together," I promised, reaching across the table to take her hand. That's what family does. The door opened as Walter returned, his patience clearly exhausted. He froze at the sight of our clasped hands. "Elizabeth, it's time to go," he said sharply. Mom withdrew her hand but held my gaze for a moment longer. Something had shifted, a tiny crack in Walter's carefully constructed wall of isolation. It wasn't resolution, but it was a beginning. As they left, Aunt Susan lingered behind. "I'm staying in town for a while," she told me. "My sister needs me, even if she doesn't know it yet." Amanda returned to find me staring out the window, watching Mom and Walter drive away. "Any progress?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "Not legally, but personally. I think Mom might be starting to see through Walter's manipulation. And with Aunt Susan here now." "That's significant," Amanda acknowledged. "Family support can make all the difference in these situations." As we gathered our materials, Amanda's phone rang. She listened for a moment, her expression changing to surprise. "That was the clerk from Judge Diaz's office," she said after hanging up. "The judge has granted our motion for a psychological evaluation and has scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday regarding the fraudulent loan and attempted second mortgage. Things are about to move very quickly." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. This wasn't how I'd imagined justice would look when we started this process. But perhaps it was the justice my mother needed most. The days leading up to the emergency hearing passed in a blur of preparation and worry. Amanda worked tirelessly, organizing evidence of Walter's financial misdeeds, while I picked up extra hospital shifts to cover the mounting legal costs. Despite my exhaustion, sleep remained elusive, my mind constantly returning to Mom's confusion and vulnerability. On Wednesday evening, after a particularly difficult shift treating a stroke patient not much older than Mom, an idea struck me. If Mom was experiencing cognitive symptoms, medical records might provide crucial evidence. With her permission, I could access those records as a family member and healthcare professional. "It's worth trying," Amanda agreed when I called her. "But tread carefully. If she's under Walter's influence, asking directly might alert him to our strategy." I needn't have worried. Mom called me the very next morning, her voice hushed. "Rachel, I have an appointment with Dr. Marshall today at 2. Walter thinks I'm having lunch with Susan. Can you meet me there?" My heart leaped. Of course. I'll take an extended lunch break. Dr. Marshall's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Still decorated with the same underwater scenes and outdated magazines. Mom was already in the waiting room when I arrived, Aunt Susan beside her. Mom looked exhausted but determined, the spark of her old self visible for the first time in months. "Thank you for coming," she said, briefly squeezing my hand before withdrawing it. The gesture spoke volumes about her internal conflict, wanting connection but still held back by something stronger than her will. Dr. Marshall, a kind-eyed man in his 60s who had treated our family through chickenpox, broken bones, and Dad's final illness, welcomed us into his office. After initial pleasantries, Mom surprised me by speaking up first. "I'm having memory problems, Jim," she told the doctor, using his first name as old friends do. "And confusion. Rachel and Susan are concerned, and honestly, so am I." Dr. Marshall's examination was thorough. He asked about medications, alcohol consumption, sleep patterns, and recent stressors. Mom answered honestly about the wine Walter served nightly and the herbal sleep aids he provided. "I'd like to run some tests," Dr. Marshall said finally. "Blood work today, and I want to schedule a neuropsychological evaluation and an MRI. Elizabeth, would you mind if I speak with Rachel privately for a moment?" Medical consultation. Mom nodded, and Susan accompanied her to the lab for blood draws. Once we were alone, Dr. Marshall's expression grew serious. "Rachel, the symptoms your mother describes could have multiple causes, from early dementia to medication effects to psychological factors like depression. But I'm concerned about the herbal supplements you mentioned. Can you get me one of these pills for analysis?" "I can try," I said. "She's been living with her husband, and I've been locked out of the house." "Locked out?" His eyebrows rose. I gave him an abbreviated version of recent events. "I've known your family for 30 years, he said when I finished. "Your father was one of my closest friends. This situation sounds deeply concerning." "That's putting it mildly," I agreed. "I'll expedite your mother's tests. In the meantime, if you can get one of those pills, bring it directly to me. Don't involve the police yet if these are prescription medications being given inappropriately. We'll want solid evidence first." When Mom and Susan returned, Dr. Marshall provided Mom with a referral for a neuropsychologist and orders for an MRI. "I want to see you again in 1 week," he told Mom. "Sooner if symptoms worsen." And please stop taking those sleep aids immediately. In the parking lot, Mom looked torn. Walter will ask about the appointment. Tell him Dr. Marshall thinks it might be stress-related, Susan suggested. That's not untrue. Mom nodded slowly. I'll try. He checks my phone, so I won't be able to call. But I'll have Susan keep you updated. As they drove away, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. Mom was taking steps toward independence, but Walter's control remained strong. That evening, an unexpected ally emerged. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Is this Rachel Montgomery? A woman's voice asked. My name is Diana Prescott. I was Walter's third wife. My pulse quickened. Yes, this is Rachel. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that you're involved in litigation with Walter. I have information that might help you. We arranged to meet the following morning at a cafe far from Walter's usual haunts. Diana proved to be a stylish woman in her 50s, with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Walter nearly destroyed me, she said after ordering coffee. He isolated me from family, controlled my finances, and when I began questioning his investment schemes, he started medicating me without my knowledge. Anxiety pills in my evening wine. I became foggy, compliant, and he nearly drained my savings before my brother intervened. Her story aligned eerily with Mom's situation. Diana provided documentation of Walter's financial manipulation during their marriage and contact information for his other ex-wives, who shared similar experiences. He's perfected his method over the years, Diana explained, always targeting women with assets who are emotionally vulnerable divorcees, widows. He love bombs them, rushes the relationship, then systematically cuts them off from anyone who might interfere with his control. Why are you helping me? I asked. We're strangers. Her expression hardened. Because no one helped me until it was almost too late. And because Walter Prescott deserves to face consequences for once in his predatory life. With Diana's evidence added to our case file, Amanda was confident about the emergency hearing. This establishes a pattern of behavior that will be hard for Judge Diaz to ignore. Combined with the forged loan documents and your mother's medical situation, we have a compelling case. Friday morning arrived with a surprising development. Aunt Susan called as I was preparing to leave for court. Elizabeth had some kind of episode last night, she reported. Walter went out, and she searched his office. She found financial statements showing the home equity money was transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands, along with a lease agreement for a condo in Boca Raton starting next month in Walter's name only. Is she okay? I asked, alarmed. Walter caught her. There was an argument. I could hear it from the guest room. This morning she has a bruise on her arm she claims came from bumping into a doorway. But Susan's voice trailed off, the implication clear. Is she coming to court today? Yes. And Rachel? She asked me to bring her medication for testing. I have one of those sleep aid pills. My heart raced. Can you get it to Dr. Marshall before the hearing? He wanted to analyze it. Already done. He's rushing the analysis. Said he'd call you with results. The courthouse buzzed with activity as I met Amanda in the lobby. We reviewed last-minute strategy while waiting for the elevator. When the doors opened on the third floor, Aunt Susan stood waiting, her expression grave. Dr. Marshall called. The pill contains a significant dose of benzodiazepines, prescription anxiety medication, mixed with an over-the-counter sleep aid. Elizabeth has never been prescribed benzodiazepines. He's been drugging her, I whispered, horrified but not entirely surprised. That's why she's been so foggy and compliant. Dr. Marshall is preparing a report for the court, Susan continued. He's filing a medical concern about potential elder abuse. Though Mom was only 61, the intentional drugging of a vulnerable adult fell under elder abuse statutes in our state. This changed everything. Inside the courtroom, Walter and Mom sat at the respondent's table as before, but the dynamic had shifted. Mom sat straighter, her eyes clear and alert in a way they hadn't been for months. Walter repeatedly leaned over to whisper to her, his smile strained when she didn't immediately respond. Judge Diaz called the emergency hearing to order precisely at 10 a.m. Amanda immediately moved to introduce the new evidence. Diana Prescott's documentation, the Cayman Islands transfers, the Boca Raton lease, and most damning, Dr. Marshall's preliminary report on the unauthorized medication. Walter's attorney objected strenuously, but Judge Diaz overruled him. These matters bear directly on the respondent's handling of joint property and on Mrs. Prescott's capacity during previous proceedings. As Amanda methodically presented the evidence, Walter's facade began to crumble. He whispered furiously to his attorney, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Mom watched the proceedings with a clarity I hadn't seen since before Walter entered her life. When Dr. Marshall's report was read into evidence, documenting the presence of unprescribed psychiatric medication in Mom's system, Walter finally lost control. "She's been unstable since her husband died," he shouted, rising from his seat. "The medication was for her own good. She couldn't function without it." "Mr. Prescott," Judge Diaz's gavel came down sharply. "One more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Administering prescription medication without a doctor's supervision is a criminal offense." Walter fell silent. His face flushed with anger or fear. Perhaps both. Judge Diaz turned to Mom. "Mrs. Prescott, given this new information, I must ask, do you wish to continue being represented jointly with your husband in these proceedings?" Mom took a deep breath. "No, Your Honor. I'd like to request separate representation. And," she hesitated briefly, "I'd like to request a temporary restraining order against Walter Prescott while these matters are investigated." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Walter stared at Mom in disbelief, his carefully constructed control visibly disintegrating. Judge Diaz nodded gravely. "Given the evidence presented, I'm granting the temporary restraining order effective immediately. Mr. Prescott must remain at least 500 feet from Mrs. Prescott and from the property in question until further hearings determine appropriate action." She turned to address me directly. "Miss Montgomery, your partition action remains valid, but I'm temporarily staying any sale of the property pending resolution of these new matters. The court will appoint a guardian ad litem to represent Mrs. Prescott's interests during this transition period." The hearing concluded with Walter being served the restraining order by court officers. As he was escorted from the courtroom, he shot me a look of pure hatred. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated any longer. In the hallway afterward, Mom approached hesitantly, Aunt Susan at her side. "Rachel, she began, then faltered. "I don't know how to begin to apologize." "You don't need to," I said. "Walter manipulated and drugged you. None of this was your fault." She shook her head. "I let him come between us. I let him turn me against my own daughter. I have to live with that knowledge." "We have time to rebuild," I assured her, though I knew the path forward wouldn't be easy for either of us. Amanda joined us, her expression cautiously optimistic. "The judge has essentially hit pause on the property dispute while your mother's situation stabilizes. Given the evidence of Walter's financial misconduct, there will likely be criminal charges forthcoming. The guardian ad litem will help protect your mother's interests in the meantime." As we left the courthouse, Mom turned to me. "Where will Walter go now that he can't return to the house?" "Based on the lease agreement we found," I said, "he already has a fully furnished condo waiting in Florida. Paid for with my home equity," Mom noted bitterly. "Part of which will hopefully be recovered during criminal proceedings," Amanda added. "Financial fraud leaves a clear paper trail." Mom nodded, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. "Where will I go? I can't stay in that house alone right now. Too many bad memories." "You could stay with me," Susan offered. "Come back to Arizona for a while. Get proper medical care. Clear your system of those medications." Mom looked at me uncertainly. "What about the house? Your inheritance?" "The house isn't going anywhere," I said. "We have time to figure out what makes sense for both of us now." For the first time in years, we were talking as mother and daughter again, without Walter's interference. It wasn't resolution, there were still painful conversations ahead, trust to rebuild, and legal matters to settle. But standing in the autumn sunlight outside the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't expected to find through this ordeal. Hope. That evening, as Aunt Susan helped Mom pack essentials for her trip to Arizona, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Marshall. "Rachel, I wanted to let you know your mother's blood tests showed concerning levels of benzodiazepines consistent with long-term administration. There's also evidence of minor liver damage from combined medication and alcohol consumption. Will she recover? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. With proper care and time, yes. The cognitive symptoms should improve significantly once the drugs are out of her system. But she'll need support through the withdrawal period and psychological help processing what happened to her. She'll have it, I promised. From Susan, from me, from all of us who actually care about her well-being. After hanging up, I sat on Kayla's balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Helping Mom transition to Susan's care, continuing the legal proceedings against Walter, and eventually deciding what to do about the house that had become both the battleground and the prize in our family conflict. But tonight, for the first time since finding myself locked out in the rain, I allowed myself to simply breathe and acknowledge how far we'd come. Walter's control had been broken. Mom was beginning to find herself again. And I had stood my ground, fighting not just for my inheritance but for the truth my father had tried to protect. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family damaged but healing, separated but finding our way back to each other. That, I realized, was what Dad had wanted all along. The house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the physical embodiment of his desire to keep us connected, to ensure we would always have each other, even when he was gone. Judge Diaz's courtroom was considerably less tense 3 months later when we gathered for the final hearing. The interim period had brought significant changes for everyone involved. Mom had spent those months living with Aunt Susan in Arizona, gradually recovering both physically and emotionally. Without the daily doses of unprescribed medication and alcohol, her cognitive symptoms improved dramatically. The neuropsychological evaluation showed no signs of dementia, only lingering effects of the medication that would continue to diminish with time. Walter had been arrested 2 weeks after the emergency hearing, charged with multiple counts of fraud, financial elder abuse, and administering controlled substances without a license. His previous wives had come forward with similar stories, strengthening the prosecution's case. He was currently out on bail awaiting trial, living in that Boca Raton condo purchased with Mom's home equity. As for me, I had continued living with Kayla while working with Amanda to resolve the property dispute. My inheritance was legally secure, but the more important question remained. What would be best for both Mom and me going forward? The courtroom was sparsely populated that Wednesday morning. Mom sat beside her new attorney, Michael Nolan, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. Her hair was styled in her old familiar way, and she wore a blue dress I recognized from happier times. I sat with Amanda at the plaintiff's table, our stacks of documents considerably smaller than in previous hearings. Walter was conspicuously absent, represented only by his attorney. With criminal charges pending, he had apparently decided to focus on his legal defense rather than the property dispute. Judge Diaz reviewed the case file before addressing us. I understand the parties have reached a settlement agreement regarding the partition action? Yes, Your Honor, Amanda confirmed, rising. After extensive discussion, Miss Montgomery and Mrs. Prescott have agreed to a resolution that serves both their interests. The agreement we'd developed was straightforward. We would sell the family home and divide the proceeds equally, with adjustments to compensate me for the utilities and maintenance I'd covered over the years. Mom would use her portion to purchase a smaller home near Susan in Arizona, where she could rebuild her life away from Walter's influence. I would use my share for a down payment on my own place in Millfield, allowing me to remain in the community where I'd built my career and support network. Judge Diaz reviewed the settlement carefully. Mrs. Prescott, do you understand the terms of this agreement? Are you entering into it voluntarily and with full capacity? Yes, Your Honor, Mom replied, her voice strong and clear. I've had time to consider this carefully, and I believe it's the best solution for both my daughter and me. Ms. Montgomery, do you concur? I do, Your Honor, I confirmed. This resolution honors my father's wishes while allowing both my mother and me to move forward independently. Judge Diaz signed the order approving our settlement. The partition by sale is hereby ordered, with proceeds to be divided according to the terms outlined in the settlement agreement. The property shall be listed with a court-approved real estate agent within 30 days. With a final strike of her gavel, the legal battle that had consumed nearly a year of our lives came to an unexpectedly amicable end. In the courthouse hallway afterward, Mom approached me hesitantly. "Would you have time for lunch? There's more I'd like to discuss that isn't about legal matters." We settled at a small cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse. The awkwardness between us palpable but no longer insurmountable. "I've been working with a therapist in Arizona," Mom began after we'd ordered, "trying to understand how I let things get so bad between us, how I could have chosen Walter over my own daughter." "You weren't yourself," I said gently. "The medication, the manipulation." "Please let me finish," she interrupted. "Yes, Walter drugged me and isolated me, but I made choices before that happened. I rushed into a relationship when I was still grieving your father. I ignored red flags because I was afraid of being alone. I let Walter convince me that your presence was a problem rather than the blessing it actually was." Her honesty caught me off guard. This was the mother I remembered: direct, self-aware, willing to acknowledge her mistakes. "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness," she continued. "I know rebuilding trust takes time, but I want you to know I'm committed to that process, however long it takes." "I'd like that too," I admitted. "I've missed you, Mom. The real you." Her eyes welled with tears. "I've missed me too." Over the next 2 months, we worked together to prepare the house for sale. Each weekend, I would drive Mom from Susan's temporary rental to our family home, where we sorted through 30 years of accumulated memories. Some decisions were easy. Mom's clothing and personal items would go to Arizona. My childhood mementos would stay with me. Other choices proved more complex and emotional. Dad's belongings, in particular, required careful consideration. "You should take his watch collection," Mom said one Saturday as we examined the cherrywood box that had housed his prized timepieces. Walter had hidden it in the attic, but not disposed of it as I'd feared. "James always intended them for you." "What about his books?" I asked, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling shelves in what had once been Dad's study. His collection of physics texts, historical biographies, and dog-eared science fiction paperbacks represented a lifetime of intellectual curiosity. "Split them?" Mom suggested. "You take the ones that speak to you, and I'll do the same. That way we both keep part of him close." These sessions often ended with both of us in tears. But they were healing tears, washing away the pain of recent years and reconnecting us to shared memories of happier times. The house sold more quickly than expected, to a young family with 2 small children. The father was a science teacher at the same high school where Dad had taught, a coincidence that felt somehow right. They loved the treehouse and the notches on the kitchen door frame, promising to preserve both during their planned renovations. With the sale proceeds divided according to our agreement, Mom found a lovely single-story home in a retirement community near Susan. I used my portion for a down payment on a charming bungalow just 10 minutes from the hospital. With enough yard space for the garden, Dad had always encouraged me to plant someday when you have time. Walter's legal troubles mounted as investigators uncovered evidence of similar financial schemes with previous partners. The district attorney offered him a plea deal that included restitution of the misappropriated home equity funds, which he accepted rather than risk a trial. The funds were eventually recovered and divided between Mom and me, providing an unexpected financial cushion for both of us. 6 months after the house sale, I took a week off work to help Mom settle into her new Arizona home. The desert landscape couldn't have been more different from the tree-lined streets of Millfield, but the small house with its terracotta tiles and courtyard garden suited her perfectly. "I never thought I'd leave Millfield," Mom admitted as we arranged family photos on her new mantelpiece. "But this feels like a fresh start, a place without painful memories." "Dad would understand," I assured her, carefully positioning his photograph next to one of the 3 of us from my nursing school graduation. "He wanted you to be happy above all else." "He wanted that for both of us," she corrected. "That's why he set up his will the way he did. He was trying to protect us from exactly what happened." "He always was the smartest person in the room," I said, smiling at his photograph, even when he wasn't in the room anymore. That evening, sitting on Mom's patio watching the sunset paint the desert mountains in shades of pink and gold, we talked about the future rather than the past. Mom had joined a local book club and was considering volunteer work at the community library. I had been promoted to charge nurse in the ER and was dating a paramedic named David who made me laugh even after the most difficult shifts. "I'm flying back for Thanksgiving," Mom said tentatively. "Susan's coming too. Would it be too much to have it at your new place? I understand if you're not ready for that." The invitation represented more than a holiday meal. It was an acknowledgement of our new relationship, independent adults choosing to spend time together rather than inhabiting the same space out of habit or obligation. "I'd love that," I said sincerely. "The dining room is small, but we'll make it work." 2 weeks later, I found myself preparing my first Thanksgiving dinner in my own home. Kayla came early to help with cooking, while Mr. Peterson brought his famous pecan pie and stories about Dad that had us alternating between laughter and tears. Susan and Mom arrived mid-afternoon, bearing side dishes and a nervousness that gradually eased as the day progressed. As we gathered around my table, mismatched chairs pulled from every room to accommodate everyone, I looked at the faces of my chosen family. The traditional family unit had fractured beyond repair, but something new and perhaps stronger had formed from those broken pieces. After dinner, as everyone helped with cleanup, a stark contrast to Walter's lordly expectations of being served, Mom pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, pressing a small velvet box into my hand. I found it when I was packing. Inside was Dad's pocket watch, the one his father had given him when he earned his teaching degree. The gold case was worn smooth from years of handling, the inscription on the back still legible. "To teach is to touch the future. He would want you to have it," Mom said. "You carried on his legacy of caring for others, just in a different field." I closed my fingers around the watch, feeling its familiar weight. "Thank you," I whispered, unable to say more past the lump in my throat. Mom smiled, then glanced toward the kitchen where Susan was laughing with Mr. Peterson as they washed dishes. "I should help with cleanup. But Rachel, I'm proud of you. Not just for fighting for what was rightfully yours, but for how you fought with integrity, with compassion, even when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserved it," I corrected gently. "You were just temporarily prevented from seeing it." As she rejoined the others, I remained in the dining room, contemplating the journey that had brought us here. The house that had been the center of our conflict was now home to another family, creating their own memories within its walls. Mom and I had each found new spaces that reflected our individual needs and futures. Walter awaited sentencing, his manipulative schemes finally exposed. Dad's inheritance had served its purpose, though not in the way any of us had anticipated. In the end, the house itself proved less important than what it represented. A foundation from which to build new beginnings, a reminder of family bonds that transcended physical spaces, and the knowledge that home isn't necessarily where you grew up, it's where you're truly seen, valued, and loved for who you are. I returned to the kitchen, Dad's pocket watch safely in my pocket, and rejoined the lively conversation among the people who had become my support system through the darkest period of my life. The house may have been divided, but in its place, something far more valuable had been built. I know we've been through quite a journey together with this story. Family conflicts over property can be some of the most painful experiences, but they also teach us powerful lessons about standing up for ourselves and finding what truly matters. If you've experienced something similar or have thoughts about how you would have handled this situation, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. This story took many unexpected turns, just like life itself. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more authentic family stories. Your likes and shares help these real experiences reach others who might be going through similar situations and need to know they're not alone. Thank you for joining me through this difficult chapter of my life. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our biggest challenges, and the family we choose can be just as important as the family we're born into. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.